good. Good morning. I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to members and staff in attendance to this meeting of the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future. My name is Nathan Neudorf and I'm the MLA for Lethbridge East and the chair of this committee. I'd ask that members and those joining the committee introduce themselves and for the record, and I will start online with the deputy chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Nicole Goring, MLA Edmonton Castle Downs, and Darren, it's wonderful to see you again. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Member Irwin.
Janice Irwin, Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Thank you. Mr. Van Dyken.
Glenn Van Dyken, MLA for Athabasca Barhead Westlock.
Thank you. Ms. Armstrong Hominick.
Good morning, Jackie Armstrong Hominick, MLA for Fort Saskatchewan, Vegreville.
Thank you. Then we will go around the table beginning to my right.
Michaela Fry, MLA Brooks Medicine Hat.
Garth Rosewell, MLA Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright.
Jordan Walker, Sherwood Park.
Miranda Rosen, Banff Kananaskis.
Rod Loyola, MLA for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Good morning, Aaron Roth, Committee Clerk.
Thank you very much, members. I would like to note for the record the following substitutions. Member Loyola for Mr. Billis. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. I would note for members that masks should be worn in the committee room except when you are speaking, and members are also encouraged to leave an appropriate amount of physical distance around the table. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Those participating by video conference are asked to please turn on your camera while speaking and mute your microphone when not speaking. Members participating virtually who wish to be placed on the speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room are please asked to signal the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting, and please be advised that all committee room public galleries are closed. Approval of the agenda. Do I have someone who is willing to propose the draft motion that the agenda for the November 18th, 2021 meeting of the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future be adopted as distributed? Any comments? Mr. Roswell, and seconded by Ms. Fry. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Online, all in favor?
Aye. In favor.
And online?
Aye.
Thank you. Online, anyone opposed? Hearing none, that motion is carried. Thank you. Approval of the minutes from the October 21, 2021 meeting. We have minutes from the October 2021 meeting of the committee. Are there any errors, omissions to note? Seeing no indication, if a member would move that the minutes of the October 21st, 2021 meeting of the Standing Committee of Alberta's Economic Future be adopted as circulated. Mr. Walker, do I have a seconder? You do? No, don't need it. Thank you. All in the room, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed in the room, please say no. Hearing none. Online, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Anyone online opposed, please say no. Thank you very much. That motion is carried. I would like to just note that MLA Leela here is online as well, if she would like to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing me to attend.
Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to the presentation from the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta. Honourable members, at our October 21st, 2021 meeting, the committee agreed to a request from the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta to make a presentation to the committee. Today we have Mr. Darren Reeder, Board Advisor of the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta, to make a presentation to committee members. Just to remind members as to the process when we receive presentations, Mr. Reeder will have 20 minutes to present, and we will have approximately 20 minutes for the committee members to ask questions following. The committee will then consider the preparation of a report to the Assembly summarizing the contents of the presentation and including any recommendation that the committee might wish to make in that regard. With that, Mr. Reader, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've been waiting online very patiently. The floor is yours for 20 minutes.
Well, good morning, Chair Newdorf and Deputy Chair Goring and members of the committee. Is my audio okay? Just want to check that before I get talking away.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. So thank you. It's an honor to once again be invited to appear before the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future, this time to present the findings from a TIA-led province-wide study on the contributions of Alberta's Crown land outdoor recreation economy, a study that I should note that was guided through the input of nearly 20 outdoor recreation organizations representing the interests of motorized and non-motorized users. And I'm going to trust that Mr. Roth in the room will just advance the slide deck as we go forward. I can't see the screen myself, so Mr. Roth, I'll depend on you. So again, my name is Darren Reader, and I'm the board advisor to the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta, or TIA for short. TIA is a not-for-profit tourism association that advocates on behalf of all segments of Alberta's tourism economy for a competitive and sustainable business environment that generates substantial economic value for the province. Before I step into the details of our outdoor recreation study findings, I would like to just briefly circle back on our TIA presentation to this committee of 1 year ago to provide a quick update on the state of Alberta's visitor economy. As I'm sure you're all aware around this table all too well, tourism and hospitality has been at the top of the list of businesses hardest hit by COVID-19. We were the first to be impacted and may well be the last sector to fully recover. 1.3 trillion US dollars. That's the global estimated loss in the international travel world due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and an amount that's almost 11 times greater than the losses recorded from the 2009 global financial crisis. Although tourism expenditures were at their lowest in 2020, and the resumption of international travel really only started to come back to life late summer of 2021, Alberta's regional visitor market came back reasonably strong this year, and tourism expenditures started to rebound within 35% of 2019 performance levels. However, and this is a big however, the domestic contribution is really only of a temporary benefit in that as international travel restrictions continue to ease, more and more Canadians are expected to seek out-of-country travel. And this is why it's critical that we make it easier for international visitors and those attending meetings and conventions to get back to Canada by completely, not just partially, but completely dropping the current PCR testing requirements, which represent both an unnecessary cost and an administrative burden on travelers. There are many things here that could be said about both the benefits and challenges of the implementation and interpretation of various federal and provincial support programs that have been intended to help businesses through the pandemic. But today, I simply want to say thank you to the members of the committee, many of whom I've spoken with personally during this crisis, for your sincere interest and attention to this most important segment of Alberta's economy. So as we seek to work through the details of the recently announced Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program to clarify eligibility criteria and whether seasonal businesses will be included and whether new businesses opened after March 2020 will be included, let me just briefly mention two underlying issues that really impact the broader industry and its ability to affect a quick economic recovery. And the first is really this issue of debt and liquidity. A recent CFIB study determined that small businesses in Canada now carry a collective $139 billion in debt due to COVID-19. The average increase in COVID-19 related debt for small businesses, tourism and hospitality businesses, is at about $333,000, an amount that's almost double the amount that small businesses in other sectors bear, with the majority of these businesses stating it will take them up to 2 years to eradicate their their pandemic debt load. We're looking for more funding agility through the Federal Tourism Relief Fund, clarification on the criteria around the Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program, and more supports to assist with liquidity, which could include an option as simple as increasing the forgivable portion that small businesses are required to pay back on their CEBA loans. Labor shortages is the other issue. The mental health and resilience of the tourism workforce has certainly been tested over the past 20 months. And a survey earlier this reveals that 50% of those that remain working in the sector are looking to leave our industry entirely. Many of our tourism and hospitality partners have been on the front lines of having to interpret and apply fast evolving changes in government policy. And it is understandable why people are tired and seeking more balance in their lives and things that are less complicated. So 3 primary areas of concern for the industry as we seek to rebuild our labor capacity include labor supply, which is really about whether we have enough of the right workers to meet future demand, skills mismatch, which is about correcting the imbalance of skills needed in the industry, and finally, learner and worker mobility, which is about the types of barriers to employment within tourism and hospitality proper. So let me shift to the purpose of today's presentation. It was against the backdrop of the twin aims of the government of Alberta to craft a new vision for Crown lands and to also grow the tourism to a $20 billion industry by 2030 that TAIA found itself undertaking this study on the outdoor recreation economy early in 2021. While Alberta Crown lands have long been recognized for the economic contribution they make through activities such as oil and gas, mining, grazing, and forestry, the importance of these lands for supporting and growing a robust outdoor recreation economy have largely been overlooked. Instead, outdoor recreation has often been viewed as an activity that it happens, it's organic, and one that just simply needs to be managed. An outdoor recreation opportunity represents the ability for an individual to take part in the desired activity in a desired recreation setting in a chosen region of the province. It sounds simple in theory, but it's quite another thing in application. Thomas Edison once said, "Discontent is the first necessity of progress." Given all the possibilities for outdoor recreation in Alberta, TAIA has mused as to whether the lack of progress in growing outdoor recreation on Crown lands is perhaps a society does not view this resource the same as other of Alberta's vast resources, or perhaps it is because government simply hasn't leaned in enough to modernize the legislative framework that would then help legitimize outdoor recreation as another driver of employment and sustainable use of Alberta's natural resources. In the past, the government of Alberta has stated, and I'm quoting, "An integrated planning system takes into account the capability of the land to accommodate renewal and non-renewable uses, including industry, agriculture, recreation, and tourism." The government has also been clear that because of the sheer size and availability of public land, this represents immense potential for tourism development. Now, it's unfortunate for Albertans that this remains as lofty an ambition today as it was in 1985, when those same aims I just referenced were articulated by the government in response to its own industrial science strategy for Alberta. Alberta's inability to seize upon this agenda over the years has only guaranteed one certain outcome, and that is that an increasing number of Alberta visitor dollars and investment capital are leaving Alberta. British Columbia, and let's be clear, British Columbia is Alberta's biggest competitor in the outdoor recreation space. The province's strategic market profile of Alberta states that they know Albertans are attracted to BC's natural scenery and nature. Notably, Alberta's tourism export deficit to British Columbia grew in 2019 to an estimated $1.05 billion. Notable is that nearly 2.5 more Albertans visit BC than BC residents come to Alberta. 55% of Alberta visits are to the Kootenay Rockies and the Thompson Okanagan. 57% of all trips to BC are to pursue outdoor and leisure-based activities. Nowhere is this gap in outdoor and nature product efficiency more evident than in comparing the province's two ski industries. The map on this slide shows both active and proposed mountain resort areas within British Columbia. Whereas BC ski areas received 6.8 million visitors in the year 2018-19, Alberta only saw 2.4 million visitors. Direct revenues and jobs attributable to BC ski areas were approximately 4 times greater than Alberta ski areas. From a revenue generation perspective, nearly 2/3 of direct revenue is attributable to export markets, whereas visits from other regions of Canada and international only contribute about 22%. This does underscore the importance of Alberta's need for strong relationships with its air carriers, given that we are a landlocked province, with many of our tourism assets located at some distance from the Canada-US land border. So why has BC been so successful? Well, in part, government supports have evolved alongside industry's needs, and there is an entire BC mountain resort branch that supports the aims of the province's all-seasons resort policy, a policy that clearly and with purpose outlines policy, process, and the requirements to set proponents up for success. So that we do not have our own outdoor recreation strategy to support Albertans' interests remains an open invitation for future visitor dollars and investment capital flows to migrate not just over the BC border, but to many others. As a province, if we can't reconcile how to modernize our public lands and provincial park legislation to support the interests of Albertans, then Taya would at least hope we can try to start having a conversation about what this means in terms of Alberta's domestic travel trade deficit, and the fact that the loss of spending and investment to other provinces, irrespective of the industry that may be involved, should always be the first line of defense to any results-based economic strategy. As Taya began to contemplate at the outset of the pandemic crisis how we might differentiate ourselves as a province in an increasingly competitive tourism landscape, how we might build back stronger after the pandemic, we invariably came back to what was inspiring most Albertans during the height of the pandemic, and that was to seek refuge, inspiration, and a recentering through nature-based experiences that existed in Alberta's outdoors. Physical inactivity represents a significant health and economic burden, with an estimated annual cost to Canadians in the magnitude of $2.4 billion in direct health effects, and an additional $4.3 billion in indirect costs, such as the loss of workplace productivity. Taya firmly believes that building out the outdoor recreation dimensions of the visitor economy will not only improve the physical and mental health of Albertans, it will contribute to greater social cohesion, community engagement, all the while supporting more businesses and jobs. If you've traveled to many regions of Alberta, you already know just how blessed we are with this large canvas of land, much of it well positioned to support sustainable tourism and outdoor recreation development. With 397,000 of Alberta's 661,848 square kilometers that are designated as Crown lands, the time is now to conceive and present strategies that will build upon the value of Alberta's outdoor recreation economy on Crown lands. And if you're trying to wrap your head around how big an area that is, consider that it is bigger than the entire country of Norway. So, for those around the table that aren't familiar with what Crown lands are, these are public lands managed under the Public Lands Act and the provincial parks and protected areas managed under a variety of other pieces of legislation. What activities are we referring to when we say outdoor recreation? Well, it includes a host of items like non-motorized and motorized recreation activities, land and water-based activities, consumptive activities like fishing and hunting, and a variety of summer and winter activities. So Albertans took over 13.4 million trips to Crown lands. That's what we determined through the study we just concluded. Well over 3/4 of those trips were day trips, the remainder overnight trips. It is worth noting that 30.7% of those trips occurred in national parks, whereas 36.7% occurred in provincial parks and protected areas. The remaining 33% of outdoor recreation trips occur on public lands. The public lands dimension is really important here because historically, these are the areas that receive little infrastructure investment and are not supported through proactive outdoor recreation planning or management frameworks that consider the evolving needs of outdoor enthusiasts. What we know is that underfunding or limited investments in enhancing the visitor appeal of public assets like parks and trails really does two things. One, it diminishes an individual's ability to truly connect with the landscape. And secondly, it all but guarantees visitor leakage to Alberta's competitors, again, like British Columbia. As part of the provincial efforts to grow to a $20 billion tourism industry by 2030, Taya has advocated that the province needs to prioritize the development of new regional destinations that can deliver world-class, sustainable, and market export-ready experiences that better disperse the benefits of the visitor economy throughout the province. This includes looking more intently at areas such as the David Thompson, Bighorn Backcountry, Crow's Nest Pass and Castle, Kananaskis Country, Lakeland Country, to name but a few. Just like other resource-based dimensions of the Alberta economy, outdoor recreation is heavily reliant on the supply and distribution of outdoor recreation resources. This is the foundation on which a stronger recreation economy can be built. Although spending on outdoor recreation trips to Crown lands may only account for 0.8% of Alberta GDP, the employment resulting from this spending was found to be 6.1 times greater than the employment in forestry and logging, and it equates to 63% of the number of jobs in the agricultural industry. And I want to be clear, this is not to suggest in any way that the outdoor recreation as an industry could grow to possibly supplant the contributions of other of the sectors I just mentioned. It's quite the opposite. What we believe is that there can be mutually achievable aims for Crown lands that can draw on the province's natural resources in a more sustainable manner that contributes to community well-being and future job creation. Consequential to the positioning of the outdoor recreation industry as a growth industry and the complementary aim of Alberta's visitor economy is what we learned through our province-wide survey efforts in this study. And that's that Albertans spent $2.3 billion in trip-related expenditures on outdoor recreation. We anticipated it was going to be a big number, but this is really a conversation starter in the context of the closely correlated tourism industry, whose pre-COVID economic contribution was in the order of $8.2 billion a year. Although work has been undertaken by other industry segments to determine their contributed economic value to outdoor recreation, such as outfitting and snowmobiling, the TIA study was really the first of its kind to consider motorized and non-motorized activities at the same time in every land use segment and across the full spectrum of outdoor recreation pursuits. While time certainly won't permit to talk about all the details of the report today, I would like to look at a few of the primary motivating activities on a per trip basis. And I'm going to just highlight a few here. So on the top of our list, we learned that hiking, walking, and running is responsible for 4.17 million visits. And this represents 24.9% of all outdoor recreation expenditures, with an average trip spend of $298 and an annual contribution in the order of 581 million. Skiing and snowboarding was third on the list, generating 1 million visits and an average trip spend of $467 for an annual contribution of 233 million. While far from the highest on a visitor volume perspective at 460,000 ATV trips, off-highway vehicle activity generated approximately $1,300 per trip and an annual contribution of around 83 million, whereas hunting was an estimated 556,000 trips, generating an average spend of about $1,011 per visit for a total of 263 million in annual expenditures. And I'm going to just pause on that point for a moment to indicate that these spending values are for within the domestic market alone, the Alberta domestic market. So this does not consider international contributions. So when I give reference to the impact of hunting being about a little over $1,000, we know that number is exponentially higher with the arrival of high-yielding U.S. visitors that come to hunt in Alberta. So our study does not consider the international contribution. So it would be fair to say these are understated values of what outdoor recreation contributes to Alberta. That could be the basis for a future study, but this is Alberta specific. So another important aspect of the study was to understand the wide range of equipment, clothing, accessories that outdoor recreationalists spend, as this has a measurable economic impact on the livelihood of many businesses throughout the province. In aggregate, over $376 million was spent on equipment and accessory expenditures. The average household spent about $10,782 on these types of purchases, although the amounts vary greatly by household. Of the households that did make purchases during the height of the pandemic, some of the notable purchases included outdoor protective clothing, which was about 72.7% of all spending. 41.8% was spent on purchasing fishing and hunting equipment, and 38.86% was purchasing bikes and mountain bikes. We also sought to understand the distribution of spending by trip-related expenditure category and to understand the distribution of trip expenditures by crown land type. Top-line results revealed that the top purchases to support Albertans' experiences on Crown lands were gasoline purchases, so that was 25% of all purchases, equipment rentals at 17%, and food and beverage store purchases at 13.6%. We were also able to map the spending on the basis of pre-trip planning, costs associated with the travel to the intended destination, and dollars spent at the intended location. So it gives us much more granular understanding as to how dollars are spent along the path to purchase. While we learned that all Crown lands support Albertans' outdoor pursuits, not all are pursued equally. 61.1% of all recreation trips occur in the South Saskatchewan region, whereas the North Saskatchewan region receives about 23%. The Upper and Lower Athabasca receives about 9.2%.
Mr. Reader,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that does conclude our 20 minutes. I'm sure there may be a member that would, in their questioning time, maybe ask you to finalize your final thoughts, but unfortunately, I do have to move to questions at this point in time. So thank you for that presentation, and I do have a short list for questions. I will begin with MLA Goring.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for your presentation. I do have 2 questions, but first I would like to just give you an opportunity to just complete your remarks.
Well, thank you very much. That's helpful. So what I'm going to do is there are a few slides that really try to relate the type of spending activity on the Crown lands area, and you all have the report, so I think I would be covering ground that is not really necessary. What I would like to do is just advance forward to the slide, I think it's slide 13, Mr. Roth, where we talk about recommendations for the future. So this is really a good segue to the 6 specific policy recommendations advanced in our report that could fundamentally alter the outdoor recreation economy and stem the hemorrhaging of investment dollars and Albertans' interest to the ever-evolving environment in British Columbia. Recommendation number 1 is outdoor recreation is an opportunity to help diversify and strengthen Alberta's economy. However, a unified and coordinated voice is critical to unlocking the potential of the industry and ensuring strong and effective government advocacy for supportive policy and investment. The second recommendation is with respect to supportive Crown land policy. To date, Crown land policy supports traditional industries like oil and gas, forestry, mining. However, we need a supportive policy framework on public lands that views outdoor recreation as an actual industry and one prioritized for growth. An intentional focus on supporting the increase and improvement of visitor amenities and services will help elevate the economic benefits of outdoor recreation on public lands. Third recommendation, whether it's trails, campgrounds, boat launches, staging areas, whitewater play parks, or infrastructure, expenditures on outdoor recreation is an investment that yields significant returns. Alberta's outdoor recreation infrastructure in provincial parks is aging, and outdoor recreation infrastructure in public lands is limited and lacking. The province needs to invest in creating world-class outdoor experiences that help us to compete for visitors within Canada and elsewhere in the world. Recommendation 4, outdoor recreation resources are the foundation of the outdoor economy. Yet Alberta lacks an up-to-date inventory of Crown land outdoor recreation resources and amenities. This lack of inventory puts the sector at great risk of not being able to effectively or be meaningfully included in land use decisions, and this could negatively impact our sector. It also does nothing to assist with the broader destination planning efforts, nor providing those with new product ideas and investment capital to spend. Fifth recommendation, you can't manage what you don't measure. Data on outdoor recreation is fundamental for informed Crown land policy decisions. We need to be able to measure and monitor the results so we can better demonstrate the positive contributions this sector has on communities, Albertans, and the economy. And finally, and thank you for indulging me with this time, jurisdictions around the globe have realized that unlocking the outdoor recreation economy requires a deliberate focus. In these jurisdictions, they've created offices of outdoor recreation. And by creating such an office in Alberta, Taya believes we could reduce government silos, better listen to public concerns, remove barriers to access, and prioritize programs that encourage growth of the industry and the protection of recreation resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reader. Ms. Goring, you may follow up with your supplemental questions.
Thank you so much. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for the really robust presentation, Darren. I know that you guys have done incredible research and work to look at how we can really improve the life of Albertans. And I think that your ability to tie in the physical health, the mental health, the economy, job growth, all of those things is absolutely essential when we're looking at travel and tourism, because I completely agree with you that we need this. It increases jobs, it provides such a wonderful opportunity for Albertans to enjoy Alberta. And so, I'm concerned when I hear you talk about, leakage into other provinces, especially BC. And one of the things that really hit home for me was that you had said BC has such a thriving industry because the government invests in it. And so when we talk about the targets of this current government wanting to increase access to tourism and spaces, what do you see as, your recommendations are incredible, but what do you see as being done to increase tourism where it's currently not happening because we have all this untapped potential? And specifically, I'm curious about what do you see in the rural economic development and how it relates to tourism?
Well, again, and thank you for the question. This is such a beautiful and opportunity agenda for Alberta. As we talk about how we would choose to navigate forward, this is an industry ripe for development, and it really represents among our best opportunities to encourage and inspire people in rural Alberta. We have so many cultural and natural resources that we can draw upon to tell the stories of regions. And this is scalable, I think, and sustainable to so many of those regions where we find ourselves with untapped potential. So again, I think British Columbia and the difference between Alberta and British Columbia is they've been intentional. And these things don't happen through good intention, through people agreeing that these are worthy conversations to be had. They start by having a policy framework in which we discipline ourselves to say we are moving towards these ends. And again, that's why I was really purposeful in my comments to say if we can't reconcile that this is, and I'm not suggesting this is an easy topic. I know there are difficult sustainability and conservation aims to reconcile on Crown lands, but I'm suggesting if we've been able to do it with other of Alberta's industries, I would think it's possible with this industry. And if British Columbia can do it, then it serves as notice to Alberta, we better get on with the agenda now. We can't afford to wait 2 or 3 years. This is not a political agenda. This is about what's in the interest of Albertans, and we need a clear commitment, I think, by government, and I would certainly look to this committee to help be part of the catalyst for that process, so we can begin to study this, contextualize this, because this represents meaningful economic opportunity and job creation efforts for Albertans.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Ms. Goring?
At this point, I don't. I just want to say thank you, and I'll open the floor to other members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rosen.
Thank you, and thank you, Darren. You covered a lot of statistics in your report, which I am very grateful for because I'm a numbers person, but I am going to ask some further follow-up to try and pull some additional numbers out of you. So your report indicates that outdoor recreation is currently only 0.8% of Alberta's total GDP. So I'm wondering if you have the number of what percentage of GDP outdoor recreation represents in other jurisdictions such as BC that have supported and developed this industry over the years.
Thank you for the question, and it is a great question. I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers at my fingertip. I mean, if we were to look at the cumulative value, and then this is going a little broader, if we look at tourism in British Columbia, pre-pandemic, it was about $20.5 billion industry. Alberta's was about $8.2 billion. So just for comparative purposes, I think that's about $4,200. I'm going off the cuff here, Ms. Rosen, but I believe it's about $4,200 per capita in the BC context. In Alberta, it's about $1,800 in a per capita. So significant attention to policy and development of outdoor recreation assets in BC have had a measurable economic impact. And I think if you had the benefit to see the map that was part of the slide deck, you would see from all the existing and intended resort developments in British Columbia that they're very much on a growth path.
Thank you. You also mentioned that Albertans who do participate actively in outdoor recreation and who are passionate about it spend on average just over $10,000 a year on outdoor recreation equipment. And I believe so that number is money spent by Albertans. I'm wondering, and I think you had the number on there, but we didn't have the time to get into it. You had it broken down for how much money Albertans spent along their trip, so how much they spent before they left, maybe on their journey, and when they got to their final destination. I'm wondering if Ty has done any research into how much of that $10,000 spend is spent either in Alberta before they leave to their trip, or if any of it is spent at their final destination, in which case we would be Alberta businesses businesses, and oftentimes small businesses, would be experiencing significant retail leakage from our own people going to British Columbia to recreate. I'm wondering if you have any breakdown of how much of that $10,000 is spent here versus at the end journey.
I do not have it broken down by, actual category and, from a pre-trip, post-trip perspective. But again, the reference here would be that this is spending by Albertans within Albertans. So, the example I think you were maybe getting at, someone that would be coming from Ontario to Alberta, that individual and those economic considerations were not part of this study. That could be a subsequent study just to consider the trip planning and spending of visitors coming from other provinces and international, but this just contemplates Albertans. So one of the percentages I did give is, with a lot of Albertans traveling to Crown lands, one of the biggest drivers of expenses to take them to the arrival point is on gasoline purchases, and then retail and consumptive food and beverage along the way. One of the things that's on the slide deck that we did not get a chance to go to, but total spending on trips within Alberta, we found was measured at the greatest within a national park setting. And a lot of that is for the obvious reason, which is there is a fixed room base and a bevy of food and beverage operations that exceed what we would find in other Crown land areas. So, those numbers are about $597 per trip to national parks. So it's greater than the combined average total spending on trips to public lands and provincial parks, which I think public lands value was about $276 per trip. And to provincial parks, it was about $249. So again, the trip component to national parks is almost double what we have in these other areas. And I guess I would illustrate that as an opportunity agenda. That's not a deficiency, and to say that that's just the way it always is with national parks. It does speak to the support of activities and assets that exist there to support the needs of visitors that would choose to recreate overnight. So this really speaks to when we look to people that have an interest in the Northeast. So when we think of the boreal forest, when we think of Northern Lights viewing, the potential for tourism asset development there is really huge opportunity to drive jobs and regional economic activity when we're clear on what product we're trying to build.
Thank you. Sorry, I do have a very full list, and we only have about 9 minutes left. I will try to alternate between sides. Mr. Reader, we could obviously take hours discussing this, and there is interest, but we are limited by time. Mr. Loyola.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Reader, for the presentation. It is a really robust presentation, and obviously it's leading us down this path of engagement. We're so interested in this particular issue because there's so much to be done. But off the top of my head, I'm wondering if there's any specific piece of legislation, regulation, or policy from the BC that you think would be good for us to adopt. If you've come across anything that you think that we should be looking at specifically in terms of legislation.
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's a fabulous question. So, in British Columbia, again, I think they're the benchmark by which we could learn a lot. We don't always like to say those things publicly, but if it moves us to actually making some economic progress, then let's have that conversation. So I think to answer your question, the BC Adventure and all seasons resort policies are good examples we can study. They've learned how to support intensive use in intensive use areas that provides a level of certainty for project proponents that we simply don't have. So whether we're talking about development on all-season mountain resorts, right, that accommodate activities such as a via ferrata, mountain biking, hiking, other activities of that nature, these are policies that provide investor certainty, connect with things like long-term leases on Crown land so that investors have this idea that there is a path to get to success.
Follow up, Mr. Morel?
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, you mentioned that the highest cost is actually transportation, getting people to where they need to go. What are the current challenges that we're facing here in Alberta when it comes to that transportation? How do you see us solving that problem?
Great, thank you. You know what, and I would suggest transportation as part of an all-encompassing strategy. I mean, when we talk transportation networks, we're really talking about core infrastructure, things as simple as supporting public washrooms, cell service within areas where people need that as a basic need for safety and navigation. But transportation corridors that are also enhanced in support of other investments that are being made to drive people down a corridor. So again, I give the example of northeastern Alberta. I think if we're really clear on the types of products we're trying to build, those do create economic arguments. They create a defensible base for why we need to invest in our technological and core physical infrastructure to support future visitor demand. So, this is to the point of the great work Travel Alberta is doing to map some of these opportunities, areas where there's potential for destination development, where we have the greatest opportunity to create new product experiences that really connect with the authentic values of the land and the people in those regions. So this is, again, it's an exciting opportunity. It's low-hanging fruit. And this really is the essence of Alberta entrepreneurialism and creativity, I think, to capitalize on this industry.
Thank you very much. Ms. Fry.
Oh, thank you. Pleasant surprise. I didn't know if we were going to get to me that quickly. So I noticed, Darren, that in your report that you had said, you had commented on the onerous task of the PCR test coming back into Canada. I note that many people in the tourism industry, as well as Canadian Chambers of Commerce across the country, have asked for that requirement to be removed in lieu of the fact that many Canadians, most Canadians, thank goodness, are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So we know that this is just an extra layer of protection, but I was just wondering if you could maybe elaborate. I know I'm from a community that is about 40 minutes from the border. We see a lot of the U.S. border and the Saskatchewan border, so we see a lot of travelers, a lot of tourists, especially given that we are right on the number 1 highway. So I know that for a lot of us, we've missed being able to cross the border to go to Montana for the weekend or whatever, and now on trips less than 72 hours, that PCR test requirement has or will be rumored to be dropped, according to the CTV. I'm just curious as if you could elaborate on what your ask is, what the TIA's ask is on the removal of the PCR test requirement.
Well, again, I'm waiting for confirmation of the formal announcement about the changes to PCR testing, but my understanding it's only going to be with the 72-hour requirement. So if you've gone greater than 72 hours, nothing has really changed. And I would suggest this is the important piece for bringing Canada's tourism economy back to life, is we need to create certainty of accessibility for travelers. I mean, if you arrive close to the border and you need to arrange for that test, and there's the it'll be completed in time, and it's $250 a person for a family of 4. I can tell you unequivocally that is going to tip someone's decision about whether they come up to a place like Banff to ski over the Christmas season, or whether they go to Colorado if they're coming from the US. So this is really about permeability at the border. We're suggesting that elsewhere in the world, people have said the gold standard for travel and resumption to doing things the way we're used to is proof of double vaccination. We're suggesting that is all that is needed. This follows the best global standards out there. And it also would have the federal government following the advice of their federally appointed expert advisory council, who are experts and have said this is unnecessary. It represents a slower recovery for industries like tourism. So we need to get on with removing that entirely. I just think this is a game of increments, of moving it to a 72-hour test requirement or exemption. It doesn't go far enough.
Do you follow up?
Yeah, I do appreciate that. And I guess I was just curious, and this is kind of off the cuff, but how do you think the expansion of rapid testing would go to create more certainty for tourists coming to Canada and coming to Alberta to recreate?
Well, you know what, I'll just speak to a principle, which is people and businesses in general love nothing more than certainty. Tell me what the rules are that I need to follow, make it accessible, make it consistent, make it affordable, and I will follow whatever the rules are. But I think the counsel to Alberta and any decisions we make is that we don't want to supersede international standards for the resumption of travel in particular. We need to get on with welcoming people back. And at a recent roundtable with Minister Schweitzer, that was our challenge of the Alberta government, is that as First Ministers, more pressure is applied on the federal government to ensure that we're dealing with that permeability issue at the border. We need, and it's not just tourism, I mean, this is the flow of people and other products and industries that will help with the resumption of our Alberta economy.
Thank you very much. Ms. Irwin.
Good morning, and thank you so much for your presentation. I must admit I learned a lot, and I read through the slides that you shared as well. And I just want, I know we don't have a lot of time, but one of the issues that is obviously incredibly important to us in the opposition and to many Albertans is the environment. And I know you sort of touched on this a little bit, but you know, it's clear the economic opportunities regarding Crown land, but we know and we saw from Albertans speaking out about how critical it is that we protect our Crown land as well. And so I wonder, could you just discuss perhaps how you know, how we strike that balance between the economy and the environment, and any recommendations perhaps for the government on this front as well?
Thank you for the question. I think that's a very thoughtful and an appropriate question to be asking. You know, and this is always going to be the concern that comes up, and it can stall any meaningful discussion out because it can suggest that some people are either on the side of development or conservation and that there is no balance. And I think we've seen, I mean, from the United Nations World Tourism Organization, the definition of sustainable tourism, and I think we've applied this to other industries, is where you seek a balance between economic, social, and environmental aims. It's not one ahead of the other. It's about accommodating all of those aims together. And I would suggest if we were to look as a starting point, we really need to look no further than Banff National Park. If you were to look at our national park system, entrenched within federal legislation are principles that we are committed to preserve these places for future generations, but we're also here to present them for the enjoyment of Canadians. And somewhere in there has been that careful balance adjudicated over the years. It's not to say it's without its challenges in reconciling the many voices at the table, but I would suggest that the aims of visitation do reconcile with the aims of conservation, because in the case of a Banff National Park, the dollars spent on park gate fees are wholly reinvested in the improvement of the park. So that's from core infrastructure, facilities, interpretation, education, boots on the ground. So again, conservation officers, and ecological restoration. So I firmly believe that the principles of sustainable land use apply completely to outdoor recreation, and that this need not be more complicated than is necessary to get on with it. So in answer to your question, let's just start by looking at what we've done successfully in our national park system.
Okay, well that's great to hear, and I don't have too much of a follow up other than, I mean, you know, it's clear we can't have an economy without a healthy, thriving environment, and I want us to really think about all of our decisions, you know, even from an Indigenous perspective of 7 generations, right? So I really appreciate that, and I think too, just around, you know, the we've seen with the Eastern Slopes as an example, and I guess I wonder if your organization has at all looked at you know, the impact of coal mining in the Eastern Slopes, and if any of that sort of development would have an impact on the industry as well.
Yeah, short answer is no. We haven't gone in to look at impact analysis in other sectors. We're really trying to advance the discussion. This being an opportunity agenda, this is about improving the stakes for Albertans. This is about conservation. This is about keeping dollars at home, creating jobs, helping people connect with the landscape. It's not an either or.
Sorry.
I think this is additive.
Sorry to interrupt. We have gone about 4 minutes over time. I was trying to accommodate as many questions as I could. But we do have to complete the agenda. At this time, I would like to again thank Darren Reeder for coming to the committee today and making such a robust and full presentation, as well as answering our questions. Thank you very much. You are welcome to stay for the final few minutes of the meeting, Mr. Reeder, but if you need to leave, you're welcome to do that as well. And you may receive some follow-up questions from committee members on their own at such time. At this point, thank you, Ms. Reeder. Honourable members, as you're aware, the practice of the legislative policy committees, after receiving presentations of the kind we have today, it is to report to the Legislative Assembly on the information that is received. These reports contain introductory remarks about how the committee proceeded with hearing the presentation, and also a summary of the presentation itself. Standing Order 52.08 subsection 3 also provides the ability for the committee to report to a minister or responsible public official on issues arising from a public meeting. At this time, I would open the floor to any comments, questions, or motions in relation to the committee reporting to the Assembly on today's presentation. Ms. Rosen.
Thank you, Chair. I actually would like to put forward a motion for today's committee. As many of my colleagues and I'm sure members of the opposition actually know, I'm extremely passionate about Alberta's tourism economy and the development specifically of our recreational tourism industry here in Alberta. So I have a motion I would like to put forward. Do you want me to read it into the record? Are we ready?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to propose that the Standing Committee for Alberta's Economic Future recommend that the Ministry of Jobs, Economy and Innovation implement recommendations from the report of the Tourism Industry Association of Alberta on Alberta's Crown Land outdoor recreation economy as part of the ministry's commitment to double tourism spending in Alberta by 2030.
Thank you very much. We will work with the clerk to get that up, especially for those online. I'm open to hearing a response or comments from the official opposition. I don't know, Mr. Loyola or Ms. Goring, if you'd have any thoughts or comments. So there is the motion there. I don't see any hands, but I will give one further opportunity if anybody has any comments. Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. All those in the room in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any in the room opposed, please say no. Online, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any online opposed, please say no. Hearing none, that motion is carried and so moved. Are there any other motions coming from the floor? Seeing none. Oh.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time, Chair, but I would assume that we need to direct Research Services to prepare a draft report for the Assembly.
Yes, that motion from the clerk.
So I have the wording here that the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future direct Research Services to prepare a draft report to the Legislative Assembly summarizing the presentation heard by the committee at its November 18th, 2020 meeting, including the or any recommendations made by the committee in relation to the presentation, and that the committee authorize the chair and deputy chair to approve the final report after its distribution to the committee.
That is on the screen. Any comments?
Because I know what year it is. I'm sorry about that.
So the date is corrected. Thank you. Any comments on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Hearing none online, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone online opposed, please say no. Hearing none, that motion is carried and so moved. We are moving on to the request for Radical Solutions to make a presentation to the committee. Honourable members, the committee has also received 2 additional requests from the organizations to make presentations to the committee, plus a third that is now going to be placed online from South Grow. The first was from Radical Solutions and the second from Health Cities. These were posted on the committee's internal website. For the record, after reviewing the request from Health Cities, it was determined that their presentation request would more appropriately fall under the mandate of the Standing Committee on Families and Communities and therefore forward to the chair and committee clerk for that committee. At this time, I'd like to open the floor to discussion as to whether the committee wishes to accept the request of Radical Solutions to make a presentation to the committee at an upcoming meeting. Are there any comments? Mr. Loyola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having understood the intention of sending it to another committee, but I would still be happy to hear from Radical Solutions at this committee, and I would support a motion to do so.
So it is now moved that the Standing Committee on Alberta's Economic Future invite representatives from Radical Solutions to make a presentation to the committee at a future meeting. Would that encompass? Thank you, Mr. Loyola. Any other comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor in the room, please say aye. Aye. Any in the room opposed, please say no. Online, all those in favor, please say aye. Anyone online opposed, please say no. That motion is carried and so moved. Thank you very much. Are there any other business? Are there any other issues for discussion before we wrap up today's meeting? Seeing none, the date of the next meeting will be at the call of the chair. Please be advised that we are discussing December 2nd, Thursday, December 2nd. That will be put forward. At this time, I would motion to adjourn. Ms. Fry, so moved. And a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, please say no. Online, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please say no. That motion is carried. Thank you very much, everyone.